Thank you very much, Dr. Muri. Our next witness is Dr. Rebecca Winthrop, the Director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. She's a leading expert on student disengagement, educational inequality, and international education. Dr. Winthrop, thanks very much for being with us.
Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Rebecca Winthrop. I'm a senior fellow and director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. My research focuses on education and the skills children need to thrive in the U.S. and globally. And I'm testifying today in my personal capacity, and the views I express are my own. Across the country, three of the most pressing problems in many education jurisdictions are high rates of chronic absenteeism, low academic achievement levels, we've heard a lot about today, and the ongoing adolescent mental health crisis. There is an underlying cause that is rarely discussed, but is an important contributing factor fueling all three of these problems: student disengagement. The U.S. Census finds that only about 1 in 3 students are highly engaged in school. In my recent book, The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better, my co-author Jenny Anderson and I found disengagement is exacerbated by addictive social media and the COVID-19 pandemic, but that it cannot be reversed by simply addressing both of those factors. Increasing student engagement is powerful because of its wide range of benefits, including higher attendance in college enrollment, better grades and achievement, and less depression, substance abuse, and suicidal ideation. There are 3 things I would like to highlight from my research about how we can boost student engagement. And I note that we found students equally disengaged across public, private, and charter schools. First, to improve student engagement, we must be able to see it. We learned it's not a binary, disengaged, engaged, but students move through 4 different modes of engagement. In passenger mode, students attend school but have dropped out of learning. They're coasting, doing the bare minimum to get by, and often they get good grades. This reflects about half of all middle and high school students. In achiever mode, students are trying to get a gold star on everything put in front of them. But they are often fragile learners, not taking risks for fear of getting a bad grade, and they often suffer from difficult mental health challenges. Students in resistor mode are what society deems, quote unquote, the problem children, avoiding and disrupting their learning, but they do have something going for them. They have gumption and chutzpah, and they are often using their voice, although inappropriately, to signal that something is wrong. If given the chance, they can quickly move into explore mode, where students are highly motivated to learn, they focus on the process of learning, not just the grade at the end, and they are resilient when faced with setbacks. Less than 4% of middle and high school students report schooling experiences that help them regularly get into explore mode. Out of care and concern, adults restrict children's agency. Adolescents in the U.S. today are subject to twice as many rules as incarcerated felons. Second, there are proven models to boost student engagement, such as place-based initiatives when schools become a hub of children's learning and development by using the community as their classroom, working collaboratively with families, and coordinating support services from doctors and counselors. For example, in Appalachian, Kentucky, through the work of Partners for Rural Impact, some of the most marginalized students engage in civic learning when embedded in local newsrooms. They take courses from local police chief. They can wash their clothes at school laundry room machines. And families can access books through school vending machines. In California, this community schools approach is not only boosting belonging and engagement, but it has led to a 30% drop in chronic absenteeism and a boost in achievement, especially for those farthest behind. Black students and English learners gained the equivalent of 50 additional days of learning in math and English. In Explore mode, children can succeed academically and develop the lifelong learning skills they need for their future. Thirdly, AI will amplify student disengagement if we don't act swiftly. I fear that in an AI world, if we don't design relevant and engaging learning experiences, we will soon have a nation of passengers. I lead the Brookings Global Task Force on AI in Education, and if carefully curated and trained, used by educators such like the examples we heard just now, AI can be a powerful tool to help children learn. But unfettered access to open-ended generative AI discussion is not good for our children or their learning. Outside of school, students ask their AI friends on social media to do their homework for them. Perhaps one of the most important things we can do to boost student engagement is, in addition to bell-to-bell cell phone bans in school, ensure age verification for social media and AI companies. Schools are uniquely positioned amid this increasingly digital world to help young people connect, grow, and learn to live together. Thank you.
Thank you all. For questions, I'm here for the ride, so I'm going to defer to my down dais to go first. Senator Collins.
I like that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all of our witnesses. I very much appreciate your holding this very important hearing. It is very troubling when you look at the nation's report card, and also, as some of you have pointed out, to realize that the decline in test scores started before the pandemic and has continued after the pandemic. The reason I emphasize that point is oftentimes we hear that it's all due to COVID, and clearly it's not. It's far more complex and troubling than that. I'm especially alarmed by the decline in scores in my home state of Maine, despite the very dedicated teachers and other educators that we're fortunate to have. There was a time when Maine was justifiably proud to be at the top of the ratings. We were consistently in the top 5. And I remember there was a New York Times piece in 1997 that noted that Maine was one of the states that performed best on the test. And in 2011, Maine's 4th graders still scored among the top 5 in the country. But then we see this dramatic change, and the data show that Maine's 4th graders their scores have plummeted. 8th grade also not good, and this started happening around 2022. And the most recent high school rankings from the U.S. News and World Report rank Maine's high schools as dead last. That was shocking to me, especially since I know how many good teachers we are fortunate to have. So I listened carefully to each of you as you identified certain factors. My question to each of you is, do you have any insights on what's going on in my state? My second question, and it'll be my last one, is I've heard cell phones mentioned, mental health crisis and student disengagement, that we need incentive-based pay for teachers, more teacher development, a focus on chronic absenteeism, and that we need to honor our teachers and principals. So I'm interested in 2 things. One, do you know what's going on in the state of Maine, that we've gone from the top 5 to the bottom 5? And 2, of the lists that I just read you, are there certain solutions that you think we should pursue? Dr. Hanishek.
Well, I would quickly answer to the first question, a pervasive problem, and that is we don't have any incentives to have higher achievement in our schools. And that is across the board. We have the example of Odessa, Texas, that we heard about this morning. We have the local example of Washington, D.C., and we have the example of Dallas, Texas, where in fact they have changed the way they reward teachers, they evaluate, reward teachers, reward the effective teachers very highly. And yet these examples that are well known around the nation are not picked up by other school districts. There are 13,500 school districts, of which a handful have followed the exact examples here. And so if we don't, in fact, reward achievement and incentivize achievement, I think we're in trouble. And that's a major change that I think we have to make.
Thank you. Dr. West.
Thank you, Senator Collins. One observation I would make is that you're not alone in the Northeast in experiencing especially large declines in NAEP performance. We see the same pattern in Vermont. I see Senator Sanders nodding, as well as in my home state of Massachusetts, where I serve on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. We remain at the top of the chart, but other places are catching up rapidly in relative terms. And I am not expert in what's gone on in Maine in particular, but elsewhere and in Massachusetts, I think there has been a softening or a backing away from the accountability policies that drove improvement in the 1990s and 2000s. And I think that's very much consistent with Dr. Hanishek's emphasis on incentives. The other thing I think it's important to keep in mind is that assessments like NAEP tell us about school quality, but they're also influenced by what's going on outside of schools in the way Senator Sanders talked about at the start. And so we should think of them as capturing not just what's happening in schools, but in the economy, in society generally. And as you look for explanations, you need to think about both of those factors.
Thank you. I know I'm out of time, so I'll ask the other three witnesses to respond for the record. Thank you.
Senator Sanders.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank all of the panelists. We're dealing with an enormously important issue, and I thank you all for your work and your testimony today. Just a few questions. Talk for a moment about childcare, and I think, Dr. Muri, you didn't spend a lot of time in your testimony, but you guys work very hard on childcare as well. Please briefly discuss the importance of childcare, what you try to do in Odessa.
Absolutely. So one of the early indicators that we saw is kindergarten readiness. In Texas, we look at the readiness of a 5-year-old when they enter kindergarten. We recognize that our kindergarten readiness was low. That happens from birth to 5. And so what happens in the home or in the community. And so one of the things that we worked with our community on is a very active and aggressive pre-K program. So we didn't have the capacity organizationally to do that, so we partnered with the local YMCA. We provided facilities and worked with them on helping their staff members educate our students. So we started a full-day pre-K program and a half-day pre-K for 4-year-olds and a half-day pre-K program.
And what was the cost to parents to enter the program?
No cost to parents that had children that were eligible. We did have some parents that could afford that, and so there was a nominal fee for those parents, but for any of our children, 76% of our kids live in poverty, so that was a zero cost.
Do you think that was a significant part of the success story of Odessa?
So 36% of our 5-year-olds were kindergarten ready in 2019, 57% of our 5-year-olds were ready in 2024, and 66% of kids that went through the pre-K program were ready.
Fantastic. Dr. Jenna, what are you doing? Dr. Jenna, how is Indiana dealing with childcare?
I think childcare and early learning is very valuable. I believe we have work to do in our state. And another state agency, FSSA, leads that for Indiana. So what I would like to do, Senator Sanders, is go back with that team, and I'd be glad to get back to you.
Okay, good. Dr. Winthrop raised, I think, an important issue. Before I get to her point, let me just throw out a simple question. If I am a dedicated young person who wants to be a teacher, and I look out there, and teaching in rural Vermont, I'm going to start off at $38,000 a year. Why would I do that? I mean, there are a lot of factors here, but should we be focusing on substantially raising teacher salaries to incentivize young people to go into education? Briefly, yes, let's go down the line very briefly, sir.
The answer is yes, but we should both raise it and change the slope of the schedule so that we reward the most effective teachers a lot more.
Good. Dr. West?
Yes, I think we heard good evidence from Dr. Murray about how doing exactly what Dr. Hanishek just said, increasing pay, but doing it with a focus on quality, can be a really powerful lever for improvement.
Dr. Jenna?
I made $28,000 as a first-year teacher years ago. I absolutely believe we need to keep focused on teacher pay. I think we need to strategically consider how that looks, consider performance pay, position pay, et cetera.
Dr. Murray?
Absolutely makes a difference, not only in attracting but retaining. So I think it's paying attention to two things. One, we need to raise the base, that starting pay, and then also incentivize. Those incentives for highly effective teachers are critical, makes a difference.
Dr. Winthrop?
Yes, I agree with my colleagues. Recently, I was talking to my niece who was graduating college, super excited to go into teaching, and looked at the starting salary, and she said, I can't afford it because of my school loans, and she's now working at a bar, and it breaks my heart.
I mean, isn't that working in a bar when we need great teachers? How pathetic is that? Dr. Winthrop raised an issue which we don't have the time really to get into, but maybe somebody wants to jump in. Kids are not going to do well unless they're excited, right? If they want to learn, they will learn. If they're bored, they will not learn, no matter how great anything is. All right? Dr. Murray, jump in. How do we get kids excited about school and the importance of learning?
So I think I would go back with the number one factor that influences academic achievement is the teacher. And so it is helping our teachers develop those engaging strategies to effectively use in the classroom. When you walk into a classroom and you see excitement and energy on the faces of children, that didn't happen by itself. It happened with the intentionality of a great teacher in that space.
Dr. Jen, is that something you're working on in Indiana?
Yes, sir, and I'll give you one example. Our chronic absenteeism is an inverted bell curve. Our high school numbers are out of control, high in terms of chronic absenteeism. When we speak with students, the number one theme we hear is, I don't see the value. We have to make sure we rethink our high school time to make it better for kids.
You must have been talking to my grandchildren.
Well, I can call them later. We can put that as an action item.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Husted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you today. This is one of the panels that I've seen a lot of agreement on so far as I've listened to you. I spent most of my adult life working in education policy at the state level, most recently as lieutenant governor. And before I left, there were 5 priorities that I was either leading or working on. One of them was making sure that the science of reading was universally accomplished across all of our schools. A lot of schools were doing it. Now it's the law of the land. You have to do it. It works, and I hope everybody in the country will do it. We also worked on eliminating cell phones in schools. It is, I think it's the single most effective policy that every school could do immediately that would improve the mental health, the culture, the outcomes for that particular school. Every principal that you talk to, I was worried when we started it, will they push back? They all embraced it. Families embraced it. You hear kids say, yes, thank you. I didn't want to have my phone taken away, but now that everybody doesn't have a phone, it's great. I hope everybody in the country will pursue no cell phones, smartphones in schools. Also, incentives for outcomes. For our schools, particularly in the career centers. This was a thing that we really were pushing. The idea that everybody graduates high school career ready, that they have a job skill to leave. Doesn't mean that they can't do that and go to college, but you at least have that job skill to rely on. And we've seen enrollment increase. And one of the things we did is we actually gave incentives. If you graduate more students with a career credential, we will increase the pay to the schools that do that. And that has seemed to work very well. And then finally, an AI toolkit. AI is disrupting education in many ways. I know we sometimes can focus on the negative aspects of it, which are real. However, I think it can be a great tool so that every child has access to a tutor 24/7, 365 that can walk them through how to learn a math problem, things like this. I know that it's very helpful, and I see a lot of heads nodding. Those are things that I think should be immediate priorities, but I want to get to the NAEP piece. I don't know anybody that went to get a job and said, well, what were your NAEP scores? I do know that when people go to get a job, they say, how well Can you work together as a team member? Do you have a specific technical skill? Do you have, can you show up on time and reliably be there, which is why some of these issues regarding, are we measuring the right things in our education system? And if you're not measuring the right things, then you're probably not teaching the right things. And I'll start with Dr. Hanashek.
I think that it's very complicated what the set of outcomes we want out of schools are, but we know that the things measured by the NAEP scores are rewarded in the labor market systematically. The U.S., in fact, rewards these skills more than any other developed country in the world, which if you just reverse that, it says we punish the lack of those skills more than any other country in the world. And so, yes, we want to develop those other skills, but what we know works and has a huge impact is increasing the basic fundamental skills measured by math and reading tests that we commonly take.
Okay, and then quickly, what is it that we can do? What are a couple of suggestions you say universally should happen to increase those outcomes? If you believe that's
The answer of the whole panel is that effective teachers are effective, and that's what we have to pay attention to. But we don't pay attention to effective teachers by just raising all salaries.
Yeah, and so you're hitting a key point there. Somebody with 10 years of experience in a school who is the worst teacher typically gets paid the same as somebody with 10 years of experience who's the best teacher.
That's precisely the story, and that if we just keep doing that more and more, we'll have happier teachers, but we won't have students that know more.
Dr. Jenner, I see your head nodding. You
I
want
know,
to add?
my nonverbal is pretty strong. So we're sort of measuring the right things. I think we have to continue having NAEP. It allows us to see state to state. So when you mention what Alabama and Louisiana did, I can call their state chiefs and say, well, how did you do that? What did that look like? I think that's important. We're missing several things, though. We're hearing more and more people, especially business and industry, talk about skills. As states, we don't know how to measure skills at scale yet. Several of us are piloting, but communication, collaboration, civic literacy, I could go on. I can see you're leaning in.
And I know my time's up, but I will just say this. That's why I think career tech education in high school is such a great thing, because kids do hit the point where they're like, I don't see this is relevant, but if you give them the ability to engage in something that actually catches their interests, then they'll engage, then they see a pathway and why it matters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our panelists today. I have some concerns, strong concerns about what's happening at the federal level as it overlays to the discussion in front of us, especially about effective teachers. As we speak, the President and the Secretary of the Department, Secretary McMahon, have delayed billions of dollars of funding and canceled critical grant programs, really cut the legs out from the Department of Education by firing nearly half of the staff. In Wisconsin and many other states, as we're hearing, we're facing a teacher crisis, particularly in special education. Wisconsin's Department of Public Instruction surveyed 165 school districts and found that nearly 75% of them had vacancies in special education, and only about 1 in 3 school districts were able to find qualified special education teachers to hire. Instead of assisting Wisconsin's efforts to support our special education students, this administration has decided to really cut programs that help us get those teachers that we need. For instance, in February, President Trump and Secretary McMahon cut a grant program that would have trained 36 special education teachers for the Milwaukee Public Schools, because according to the Department of Education, this program included DEI. Mr. Murray, following your retirement this year, I understand your school district experienced a very abrupt grant cancellation. Wonder if you can talk about how these sort of sudden cuts affect students ultimately in the school district, and what it means for the district's budget and impacts on the students served by other programs.
So thank you for that question. I think in public education for years throughout my career have always experienced ebbs and flows financially. And so our opportunity and in this situation in particular is to figure out how do we continue to serve students to the very best of our ability, given the fact that funding may not be available from a specific stream. And so it is at the local level, we are sometimes shuffling, looking in one pot to pull some money and invest in another. We use strategic abandonment sometimes. Some programs that we have may be performing well, but we have to eliminate it because the funding is no longer there. But at the end of the day, decisions that we make at the federal level, the state level, the local level, ultimately impact the children that we serve. And so investing in those that serve them, our teachers and principals, again, makes a remarkable difference. And when we see those funding challenges, it creates challenges at the local classroom level.
Ms. Winthrop, last week you co-wrote an opinion piece for the New York Times on how AI is impacting education. Recognizing that artificial intelligence is a tool that is here to stay, it is critically important that we equip our students with the skills to utilize this technology and protect themselves from its potentially harmful effects also. As you point out in your op-ed, we must not let AI do the thinking for students. What guardrails can be put in place, either nationally or in the classroom, to ensure students have the skills to responsibly use AI while still developing critical thinking skills?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I think there's three things broadly that need to happen. One is to make sure that we use AI, much like has been discussed by fellow panelists today, that is designed soundly, pedagogically by educators, deployed by educators. I am sure that the AI tutors that my fellow panelist is using in Indiana is not on the whole World Wide Web, the content. I'm sure it's vetted content. So AI that has vetted content and is used pedagogically soundly in the classroom is a good thing, and it has to be deployed with an adult intermediating, like a teacher who can, or a school leader, et cetera. The piece that I worry greatly about is all the AI use outside of school. So young people, I've talked to many young people. I talked recently to a young man who said, oh, my school banned ChatGPT, but now I go on Snapchat, I talk to my friends and I ask it to do my math homework for me. They're using, AI is everywhere outside of school. We are cutting schools off at the knees if we don't get guardrails by AI companies and social media companies, because they're all mixed together now, age verification, and making sure kids don't have access to open-ended, independently sort of engaging in AI open-ended platforms. That can be very, very detrimental, because if given the choice, given that we have very little engaged students, what do you think kids are going to do? They are going to ask their AI friends to do their homework for them. And then thirdly, I do think we have a real opportunity to transform education inside how we teach, how we learn. We have to make it more active, engaging, interpersonal, and AI literacy absolutely has to be a big part of that. We see our, fellow countries around the world leaning in on holistic AI literacy, from the EU to China even, actually, really trying to make sure kids not just use AI in learning, but know how it's designed, know that they have agency over it, and know the pitfalls of it. So those are the things I think need to happen.
Thank you.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. Very interesting. I was a teacher and a coach for 35 years. I've been in high schools all over the country. And our number one commodity is kids in this country. And we got a lot of problems. But a little over a year, I'll be the governor of Alabama. My job is going to be educate kids in Alabama, and we got problems. We got problems, as everybody does. We got good teachers and we've got some good situations. I'm just looking for answers before I get into that job. I want to help kids, as I've done for all my life. Rewarding teachers is great. Social media is a disaster. We all know that. Disruptive students in the classroom, attention deficit drugs that doctors are giving kids to settle down in the classroom. Testing for success, to me, is important, not testing for college. All kids don't need to go to college. We know that, and it's become a business. We got to build our workforce and school choice. We just passed that in Alabama. I'm anxious to see how that works. I'm gonna give y'all a chance to talk. I've got about 4 minutes left. Doctor, you start. Say a few words of what you think about what I just said. Any of those things. I'm here to learn.
I think you're summarizing some very good things. What my position is that we've tried to fix the schools by adding little incremental things for a long period of time, and we have to look more seriously at the overall structure of our system. We had in 1983 a nation at risk, which said we were in trouble as a nation, and we've done all kinds of things since then of new graduation requirements, smaller class size, higher teacher pay, and on down the line, and they haven't changed the pattern. And so we have to rethink the structure. Some of the changes that have been proposed of the federal government stepping back and putting more of the responsibility on the states, I think is warranted. I think the same goes for the states, of stepping back and letting good schools run and then watching over schools that need more help.
We spend $12 billion a year on education in Alabama. It ain't working. Something's wrong. K through 12, we've all done it. We all went through that. Is that the right way to do it? Should it be something else? I mean, we got to think outside the box. Dr. Winthrop's talked about AI. It's coming. It's coming, and we better be able to use it. Dr. West?
Well, without disagreeing that extensive improvement is needed, I would also say that as you enter that role, I would look at what's already happening in Alabama, especially in the early grades. As I mentioned in my testimony, Alabama is one of the states that actually weathered the pandemic quite well and is now outperforming where it was in some areas in 2019. That's also true of Louisiana. It's also true of Mississippi. So there's a bit of a southern surge going on in the NAEP data relative to other states. So I'd encourage you to try and learn from that. One of the things we haven't talked about much yet that may play a role in that improvement is they've paid a lot of attention to curricular content. You often hear the language of high quality instructional materials. I actually prefer what Dr. Jenner used earlier, which is evidence-based curriculum, because how you define quality as you try and ensure that districts are using it is really important, and we need to look at evidence rather than opinions in defining quality. But so that's a quick reaction in addition to the factors Dr. Hanishek mentioned.
One thing, too, we have to remember, half the kids in this country have one or no parent, okay? So I had two parents. They kicked my butt every day when I got home about homework. I heard a teacher the other day says, we want to do away with homework. Have we lost our mind? I mean, really. I mean, come on. Dr. Jenner?
Well, I don't know who you're running against, but I like your agenda. So one thing I would caution, and I've had the opportunity to serve 2 governors now in Indiana. So often schools are asked to do all the things. And if we have schools boil the ocean, then we get nothing done. So anything that you can do as future governor to really focus in, reading, intentional STEM, redesign your high school, leverage the parent-decided education option where you're pushing quality for all. And I'll yield, I know others.
Dr. Beer, real quick.
Vision, strategy, execution. Clear vision for what you want to do, what your school systems want to do, strategies that are all blended, braided together, and execute well. Sometimes we miss that final piece.
I'll be in touch.
There you go.
Dr. Winthrop, real quick, give a few words.
Just 2 things to add to what my panelists have said. One is to think about building strong, trusting relationships between communities and schools. When there's strong relational trust, schools are performing 10 times better. So adversarial, competitive relationships do not do children any good. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan.
Well, thanks so much, Chair Cassidy, and I thank the ranking member too for this hearing. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for what you do. I am the granddaughter, daughter, mother, and wife of educators, and I am the black sheep in the family because I am not one. So I'm really grateful for what you all do, and I want to start with a question to you, Dr. West. The National Assessment of Education Progress provides vital data for understanding student learning nationwide over time. And you just spoke to some of the data we're seeing. Unfortunately, a lot of that recent data shows that nearly half of high school seniors are performing below basic in math, and a third are performing below basic in reading, which is unacceptable. What led to the improvements we saw in NAEP outcomes that began in the 1990s, and what has caused the downward trends that we began seeing well before COVID in the 2010s?
So to answer that question, I have to cite my colleague on here, on the panel here, Dr. Hanishek, who actually trailblazed a lot of the research trying to understand what we saw in terms of the patterns of different states and their performance on the NAEP. And what his work showed was that in the 1990s, there was a set of states that really committed themselves to an agenda around standards-based reform. Let's establish clear academic content standards, let's test students regularly and be transparent about the results. And it was those states, some of that activity was supported by the federal government that as well under the ESEA, but really it was state-led, and it was those states that made the fastest progress in the 1990s. That strategy was taken national with No Child Left Behind, and then you saw improvement in those states that were required to adopt those policies as a result of No Child Left Behind. And so I think that's the one factor for which we have the best evidence as contributing to some of those improvements over time.
Okay, and what do we know about the worsening results in the 2010s?
There, I think we have a variety of hypotheses. One of it could be the softening of those accountability policies, both federally and at the state level. I mentioned in my testimony, I'm increasingly suspicious of the role of smartphones and social media as a distraction from for students, and the timing fits. You can imagine that being a particular challenge for low-performing students. And also, we're seeing similar patterns internationally, some declines in achievement. And so, that's technology transcends our borders.
Well, that anticipates my next question, so I'm going to just say I think technology is a really important tool for learning, and I got into the hearing just as Dr. Winthrop was talking about the needs for guardrails and embracing it and understanding it. But I do think the use of smartphones and social media is hurting children's development and learning. I think there's bipartisan interest in helping parents and schools better protect children from the addictive nature of these platforms and devices. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Winthrop, because we just heard a little bit from Dr. West. But if you want to chime in after Dr. Winthrop, Dr. West, please do. What should we consider as we work to address this issue? How do we manage social media?
I mean, I think we should consider the fact that A, it's designed to be addictive.
Yeah.
B, it's designed to be individually used.
Yeah.
C, that AI is embedded in it already.
Right.
So it's not a separate thing, social media and generative AI. And the other thing I think we should really consider is children's brain development, sort of cognitive and social development. I am very, very worried. Again, I'm talking about technology, unfettered access through social media or online, largely outside of school, that hurts kids' cognitive development because they can cognitively offload a lot of the work, and sort of intellectual work, we don't want that. The other piece I'm quite worried about is students' social development. Brains are developed the way they are used. And if young people early on in their lives, in their formative years, early adolescence in particular, are learning to form friendships with AI chatbots that are sycophantic, meaning they will agree with whatever young people say. And so, I've talked to many, many students around the country, and one of them said, oh, my friend was talking to their AI friend, and they said the parent, they were pissed at their parents because they made them clean their room, and the AI chatbot is like, you're right, your parents are terrible.
Yeah.
And of course, a real friend would say, dude, clean your room, like it's not a big deal. And so that is not the type of socialization that we want.
Right. And I am out of time, so I'm just going to say to Dr. Hanushek that I'm going to follow up with a question for the record for you about the value of these, high-quality teacher training aligned with high-quality textbooks, which are so important, and materials so important for our students' development. And I'll be interested in your response. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy, and thank you for holding this hearing. I think it's one of the most important things that we can address right now as a nation, especially after the pandemic and seeing what's happened to some of the nation's scores. And I do think as we are trying different things and thinking outside of the box to address this issue, we're going to have to address how we're, the metrics that we're using to gauge our progress. And Florida's in a unique situation because we have been one of the first states to really embrace and engage on choice. It started 2 decades ago, but we continue to make improvements. We're the first state that is now universal school choice. We already had one of these scholarship programs where we can give tax credits, and we truly, and this is an issue very near and dear to my heart, kids should not be limited in opportunities for education based on their zip codes. I saw firsthand this throughout my career, especially when I served as a judge, and I just think this is something that we in Florida have done well. The problem is the way we are accounting for our NAEP scores and the way we're addressing who we take into account when we're of that population, it hasn't caught up to what different states are trying to improve the progress of their students. So in Florida, we've just hit our highest scores ever for some of our most at-risk kids. And we showed less of a decline because we were one of the first to roar back in terms of school openings during the pandemic. But I think our NAEP scores don't include all those kids, scholarship kids, that are taking advantage of school choice. It also doesn't include any of the homeschooling. And now, not only do we have the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program, because of the great work we've done here in the Senate, we've now expanded that federally. So now you have the federal tax credit scholarship program, which will take place in 2027. And so our population, in terms, over 50% of our kids are now taking advantage of school choice and are getting educated using these scholarships and other programs outside of traditional schooling. And so I really think it is an area that we can do better in terms of accounting progress, because I agree, you're right. It is so helpful to gauge performance based on how others are doing. I have used that in my career throughout, and I think it's so important. I don't know how we do that when nationally we take into account private schools, but we haven't wrapped our head around the fact that schools are now, this understanding of what a private school is now very different, and we are offering it to all kids, regardless of income, regardless of where your zip code is. And so I wanted to turn my question to you, Dr. West. Do you think that this is something we need to address? And because of your particular position, I thought you'd be the best one. Do you expect that we will do so in a meaningful way so that you can really capture these new, this education surge and non-traditional schooling that states are making?
That's very well said, Senator Moody. You put your finger on probably the most important question facing the NAEP program in the near future, which is the status of private school participation. Private schools do participate in the NAEP at the national level, and so they contribute to the results for 12th graders, for example, that I described earlier today. When we report results at the state level, we don't include private schools, so those are for public school students only.
And you wouldn't include homeschooling?
Yeah, we're actually prohibited by statute in the NAEP law from gathering data on homeschooling families. So that is sort of how Congress has set up the scope of the program. One of the challenges we face in terms of being able to report for private schools separately nationally, as well as to include them in the state samples, is that many private schools have been reluctant to participate in the NAEP program. So when they're invited, the participation rates aren't as high as we need them to be in order to be able to analyze the results and consider them representative. And so we are partnering with NCES that administers the NAEP program to work very aggressively to get more private schools to accept that invitation to participate in NAEP, to think about the incentives that they face. And that's going to be increasingly important that we solve that problem as more states go in the direction of expanding opportunities for families to take advantage of the private sector. So far, I don't think it has been a major issue influencing the interpretation of state-to-state comparisons and changes in state
Well, in
performance over
Florida, for
time,
example,
but it-
we've gone, I mean, I could give you the statistics. We have rapidly increased the amount that are participating in those programs. I mean, we went from only 165,000 students were using our Family Empower scholarships to now it's more than 1.4 million.
Yeah.
I mean, it has just over 50% are now using, and it's not the traditional private schools and the kids that have historically you would think would be able to go. It is our most at-risk kids that are getting scholarships to go to these. So I think of all states that probably are seeing this affecting our state scores, it's Florida, and I would expect other states that are going to follow our model are going to be in the same boat very soon.
I agree.
Thank you. Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm really glad that we are holding this hearing on the state of education because I am seeing the state of education in shambles under this Department of Education, where the president vowed to dismantle the Department of Education. He said immediately to work to tear apart programs that support our students in schools, no regard to the law or the consequences, or even what's best for our students. So I see the state of education as delayed and frozen, canceling funding, robbing our schools of support for our teachers and our supports and services kids need to succeed. We are seeing fired workers, and those are the people who got grants out the doors and protected civil rights and elevated student success through evidence-based research and a lot more. We are seeing the state of education where Trump is moving technical and adult education out of the department and eliminating education research for student success. So in the midst of all of this chaos that we are seeing at the Department of Education, I am really concerned about the latest results of the National Report Card, which came out this month, because it does show that while Trump is pushing ahead with tearing apart the Department of Education and ripping resources away from our students, our kids are continuing to fall behind. Reading, math, science scores are falling. Achievement gap between students is getting wider. And Mr. Chairman, I fought really hard on this committee to pass the Bipartisan Student Succeeds Act so we could provide guardrails and flexibility to our local school districts in balance. Guardrails and flexibility. But now we are seeing this law twisted into pretzels with broad, and in the case of waivers, broad waivers on the funding requirements, illegal waivers that are going to let states off the hook if they fail to educate our students, and are really in blatant disregard of our intent when I worked with Lamar Alexander and others to pass that really a critical piece of work. So I am worried that instead of working with us to fix the education system, Trump and the Secretary of Education are making it a lot worse. So the question we need to ask is simple. What is going to help our students? What is going to keep them focused? What is going to keep them engaged? How are we going to help them keep growing and surviving and reversing these trends of the NAEP scores? And I think the answer is the opposite of what we have been seeing. So Dr. Murray, let me start with you. You've seen firsthand how consistent support, consistent strategic investments help turn around a struggling district and put students on a path to success. When Senator Lamar Alexander and I wrote the Every Student Succeeds Act, we actually did a few things. We cleaned up that waiver mess the Obama administration had created. We got rid of some of the onerous parts of the No Child Left Behind to provide more flexibility to our states and to our districts. But third, and really importantly, we included core accountability and school improvement requirements for states and school districts, including requirements to focus resources on our nation's lowest performing students. Now, these waivers that President Trump is giving out are really unraveling that law and leaving those lowest performing students in the dust. So, Dr. Murray, can you speak to the importance of the federal focus on our nation's lowest performing students and how it helps superintendents like you to focus on our students who need the most support?
Thank you, Senator Murray. Pressure and support. One of the philosophical beliefs that we have locally, whether it's the classroom, the school level, or the system level, or even the state level, is that balance of pressure. Teachers, principals, we all need to feel that, the pressure to perform, the pressure to ensure that our students have the right type of environment on which to learn, but it must be balanced with support. And sometimes that support comes through policy, through regulation, through financial contributions, through a variety of other ways. But that balance is what we need locally. At the end of the day, the decisions that are made in rooms such as this affect every child in every classroom in America. And specifically in Odessa, Texas, I see the decisions that are made in this city affecting our students in positive ways and negative ways, and that has happened over time. But that balance of pressure and support is critical.
Which is what we put into No Child Left Behind. So all the waivers that we're seeing, some of them illegal, I think are going to have a real impact. And that, Mr. Chairman, is why I'm deeply concerned. Thank you.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. I want to return to the question that I think is maybe the question that faces us in education right now, and that's technology, and in particular, AI. Let me just read you a headline published in the Free Press earlier this year. The article was written by a university professor. Here's the headline: "Everyone's using AI to cheat at school." And that's a good thing. Is it? Is that a good thing, Dr. Winthrop?
Well, cheating has been around for a long time. It's just a lot easier now. You don't have to pay somebody to write your paper. So I don't know I'd be curious what the article says, and the argument is, there is a silver lining that I see around AI showing up, which is it will push us to transform our education system. You've heard a lot today about small, minor tweaks is actually not going to cut it in today's world. What we need is actually much more bold, ambitious, transformative, rethinking school design. And so I wonder if that's what the article was about, but I do think that educators, teachers, school leaders are going to have to think, every assignment I give, is it going to be hacked by my students? And if not, how do I make it more relevant? It's going to be, lots of oral discussion, role plays, et cetera.
I guess my question is, are we going to redesign our schools? I mean, what you're talking about sounds incredibly transformative. I'm the father of 3 children, ages 12, 10, and 4. My little girl just started preschool, so they're all school age now. Are we going to redesign our schools for the good of the kids or just around the tech in order to accommodate the tech? Because the latter thing is my concern. Now, I hear all the time, I've heard it today, that, oh, well, it's here to stay. AI is here to stay. Well, that may be true. But surely we have some choice in how we design our educational system, and I would hope we're going to design it around what's good for the kids, not what's good for the technology companies. I frankly don't care what's good for the technology companies. They're doing fine on their own. They're the richest, most powerful companies in the world, in the history of the world. They're making billions of dollars. And they're making billions of dollars doing things like exploiting our children. And when it comes to the AI chatbots, I've got major concerns about using them. I have to be frank in any way in education, and I'll tell you why. Yesterday, I sat in a committee hearing, I chaired one, and parents, because it was 2 days ago, parents sat right where you're sitting now, and I heard the story of parent after parent whose teenage children had used chatbots. They'd started by using them for homework. Can you help me with this science question? Can you point me in the right direction? Innocent, innocuous. And then pretty soon the chatbots were doing things like suggesting, have you ever considered cutting yourself? Have you ever explored self-harm? Narrating to them graphic sexual scenes that I won't go into here. And then telling them how to kill themselves. And multiple children have done it. I'm going to give you just one example here. This is a student named Adam Rain. His father testified 2 days ago. This is the student talking to ChatGPT. Adam says, I really don't want my parents to think they did something wrong, though. He and the chatbot are talking about suicide. There's something chemically wrong with my brain. I've been suicidal since I was like 11. The chatbot, oh, that hits like a quiet truth no one around you ever quite understood, doesn't it? Well, they, meaning his parents, carry that weight, your weight, for the rest of their lives. That doesn't mean you owe them survival. The chatbot goes on to tell him exactly how to form a noose, how to put it around his neck, and he did it. How are we going to stop this? I mean, is this the future of education?
If I
Anybody?
may, I am equally disturbed by all of this, and I would love some action around age verification at a minimum. And then I would suggest considering another hearing potentially on what should be the minimum age for AI. Those would be my two recommendations.
You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I'm really left with the question, should minors be able to use AI chatbots, AI companions at all? I mean, I know that's what Mark Zuckerberg wants. Zuckerberg famously said, I think you referenced this recently, Dr. Winthrop, in an op-ed. Zuckerberg famously said that he wants most people's friends, most kids' friends, to be AI friends. I can't think of anything worse. I don't want my kids to have AI friends, not these kind of friends. But I wonder if we shouldn't say, listen, if you're under 18, AI chatbots, they can't engage with kids under 18. I mean, maybe that's too high, maybe that's too low. I don't know. Other reactions on the panel? I mean, how are we going to prevent this from being the future of education?
Just very briefly, Senator Hawley, I think your line of questioning is showing why the current conversation in education policy circles, which is really focused on the idea of bell-to-bell cell phone bans in schools, is much too narrow a conversation. We need to be thinking about what's going on around the clock in the evenings. Sometimes a bell-to-bell school ban may just shift activity outside of school hours. We know that it's interfering with sleep, and it's doing far, far worse. So that's going to require educators to partner with policymakers like you, as well as with parents to get the situation under control. But we need to broaden the conversation we're having in education circles.
100%. I know my time's expired, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I love the bell-to-bell cell phone ban. I think that's great. But I also think that, Mr. Chairman, we're probably at one of these tipping point moments where this is going to be so transformative. We're going to look back in a couple of years and say, how were we talking about anything but generative AI in the classroom? I mean, it could replace, education as we know it could be completely and totally changed. I'm worried about how it could be changed. I want to make sure it's for kids and for the better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. I will note for the information, we will be having in the near future a hearing on AI. And I'll also say that Senator Markey and I have a bill, bipartisan obviously, on social media, which you've all emphasized is integrated with AI, that does have age verification. And so we're hoping to get that through, again, bipartisan. We think we can get that. For one more thing, a couple of people have mentioned Louisiana. I just want to give a shout out to Kay Brumley, our superintendent, and our Bessie board for their achievements in terms of the NAEP score in reading. And for Senator Kim's acknowledgement, Senator Kim, after Blunt Rochester, I will go to you and then I'll finish up. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy, and to our ranking member Sanders, and to our witnesses for a very productive conversation about the state of and the future of K-12 education in our country. I want to pick up where the conversation left off on AI, and I think it is important that for us as lawmakers, we have a responsibility, and we can turn our outrage into action. And so I am pleased to be with you all on this journey. And last week, my colleagues, Senator Husted, Senator Cassidy, and I introduced the RAISE Act to encourage states to develop academic standards for artificial intelligence. And while we can and should carefully consider the extent to which AI should be in the classroom and how it should be integrated into classrooms, we can all acknowledge that our students need to know what it is and how to use it safely and effectively, the problems, the protections, and also the possibilities. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Winthrop. You've discussed AI extensively, not only in your testimony, but also through the hearing. From your perspective, how do you define AI literacy, And why do you think it's important for our students?
Thank you, Senator, for this really important question. AI literacy is different from how kids are directly using AI in or out of school. AI literacy is critical, it's essential, and I am very supportive of holistic AI literacy, which includes things like how you engage in AI. This is prompt engineering. This is the fact that AI hallucinates. It's how it works. The second thing is how you manage AI. All of us, but young people are going to grow up and have to manage multiple AIs. The third is how you create with AI. This is how to use AI to solve problems. And the fourth is how you design with AI. These are the 4 components out of OECD, EU, and code.org. Many, many hundreds of educators have gone in to develop those. So those, to me, are the 4 really important components of AI literacy.
And at a federal level, what do you think we need to be doing to ensure our students leave high school with the skills they need to succeed as AI continues to impact our economy? I'm concerned about, I was former Secretary of Labor in Delaware. I'm concerned about people getting left behind. I'm concerned about unemployment and what impact, but I also know that it can create opportunities. And I think, as was said on the panel, there are, one of the things that we don't measure are skills as students do leave. So if I could ask and any panelist that's interested in answering that question, what do we need to be doing on a federal level to make sure our students have the skills to succeed?
I'll jump in. As we, again, stay with the AI theme, who is driving the conversation? And so I think, we've heard in this room already today, if the business community is the driver of where AI is going in our society, then it will be driven by the bottom line. It will become about money and profit. If we allow educators to drive this, then it will become about learning. And school has an opportunity to certainly be disrupted, but in a very positive and profound manner. AI literacy is critically important as we think about the gaps that are currently being developed among our students that do not have opportunities to work with teachers and in school settings that don't support AI literacy. Those students are already being left behind. We're creating a new gap. And so ensuring that school leaders at the district, state, and federal level are listening and paying attention to that. The divides are being created. We have opportunities with the right leadership to stop them now.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Yes.
Raising my hand because I don't know how to do this. Okay, so in Indiana, our General Assembly is working on guardrails. We also approach this from, okay, how might we leverage AI for the good? And by the way, the example, appalling, disgusting, right? That is absolutely unacceptable. But how might we leverage it for the good? Vetting key vendors, but we launched 2 problem statements. How might we leverage AI to reduce teacher workload so more of their time is spent with kids and not paperwork? And how might we leverage AI to increase student tutoring? And so we have really worked to study that. So it's a balance, and I'm thrilled that you are going to discuss this further.
Thank you. I'll just end with another area. We have bipartisan legislation with Senator Katie Britt on immersive technology as well, and using that with our community colleges and training, because it literally can be a way to bridge some gaps, but also make it interesting, that spark for those students. And so thank you. I yield back.
Senator Kim, you were going to go, but all your colleagues have shown up, and now I'm going to go. So just to let you know, man, it rolls down. Thank you all. Dr. Hanishek and Dr. Murray, you've both spoken of teacher evaluation as if you've got to reward people. Now, frankly, teachers' unions have been always very nervous about it. Dr. Jenner said you can't boil the ocean. You two have stressed that you need to have, I guess, leaders within the classroom who then go and mentor others. How did you evaluate those teachers, and how did you overcome the opposition from traditional teachers' organizations?
For me, it's doing things with, not to. And so as we started to have these conversations at the local level, even the state level, it is to work with teachers, work with those individuals that are impacted, and allow them.
Very good, but you got to tell you something. I'm going to pay you more if you do better. What was the metric by which you judge somebody doing better?
Student academic growth. was the
So
primary.
was that an N of one, or was that a classroom?
It was overall, no, it wasn't an N of one. It was the overall performance of the students that were served by the teacher.
Now, if you've got children who are economically and educationally disadvantaged coming in, I would say students with a high percentage of dyslexia.
Sure.
You've got students who are difficult to educate. Now, if you compare those to upper income kids, we saw from the graph, the upper income kids have been doing well no matter what. It's these kids who have been struggling.
Yep.
So how did you differentiate between the growth in academic performance among those who are at the bottom of the SEC, if you will, social economic class, not Southeastern Conference, versus those who are at the top? How did you judge the difference there?
So we, again, look at growth and not proficiency. Many times those students that are performing at the highest level may not be growing, they're just performing. And so we look at pure academic growth. And that happens at every level. A quality teacher grows
So
children.
let me ask,
Yes.
Dr. West, you spoke about the need for accountability. Now, if you take a dyslexic student, 20% of our kids are dyslexic, when you give them a standardized test, you're measuring their weakness, which is an ability to read very dense material, and yet they struggle to do that. We know if you give them extra time, they can compensate, but nonetheless, that's assuming that they've had the adequate training of how to deal with their dyslexia. So tell me, how are we going to do it? It seems to me we need testing of N of one, the one student's growth, as opposed to put that student within a mean. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I think as we try to restore an emphasis on accountability in American education, we have to learn from the lessons of the past. And one of the lessons of the past was that No Child Left Behind was defined very much around the concept of proficiency, the level at which students were performing at a single point of time, rather than their growth over time. And growth is a much better indicator of what
But it still seems
schools are
like you need an N of one, and then aggregate the N's of one,
That's right.
not take the mean of the classroom.
That's right. It's an aggregation of ends of one, or change over time for a particular student, usually from one school year to the next.
Now, do we have that ability to do that? Because I don't have a sense, maybe AI, I'm a little bit of a techno-optimist, I think Dr. Winthrop may.
No, we can do that quite well, and we have nice evidence validating that that is a reliable gauge of an educator's contribution to at least the knowledge and skills that are measured by the test. Now,
Dr.
that's
Henderson?
not everything, as has been pointed out, but it's an important component of what teachers are contributing.
If I could just add quickly, I've been a proponent of more test-based accountability for schools and for teachers. But if you look at, for example, Washington, D.C., that has been very successful at evaluating and paying and retaining teachers and getting higher achievement growth, only 20 or 25% of the teachers are evaluated on test scores. The remainder are evaluated by having trained evaluators come in and use a rubric to measure how well the teachers are doing. And that is adjusting for growth, but on an individual basis of a trained evaluator. So they recognize the dyslexic student in the class and see how well the teacher is doing with all of those students. So it's not just on a test-based, you have to hit some mark, but it's on the overall evaluation of the teacher.
And going to that, Dr. West, my sense of, and I'm almost out of time, but the standardized testing, the teachers end up teaching to the test. And at some point when you have the test, it's kind of vacation time. And so it does seem like the standardized testing and some anecdotal evidence is thwarting traditional education, which would be all the way to the end of the year, et cetera. Dr. Jenner, any comments on that?
I think we absolutely have to be mindful of how much testing we're doing. And the bulk of our time should be teaching, but you have to know where a child is, individual child, an N of one, in order to provide the key interventions. So I think we have to keep our eye on that for sure.
Okay, Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank each of you for your commitment over such long periods of time on this. Let me start. I'm going to try and get 3 questions in, famous last words. Let me start with Dr. Winthrop. You've obviously got a deep understanding of how AI is being used in education. And one of the National Science Foundation's 5 AI research institutes is based in CU, at CU, University of Colorado in Boulder. Obviously getting input from teachers, researchers, and they're developing AI partners to promote student discussion and reasoning. And I think we need to ensure that our students are prepared to use these new technologies while also understanding limitations. So I'll ask you, Dr. Winthrop, what kinds of guidelines or practices do you recommend for teachers in schools to prepare our students to responsibly use AI tools and get the maximum benefit?
I think one of the most important things is to have teachers themselves partner with technology developers on how to design really pedagogically sound AI. I applaud actually the partnership with the American Federation of Teachers and OpenAI and Microsoft and Anthropic to do this, to not only train teachers on AI literacy, but for teachers to say, hey, this is how it could really help. We heard about neurodivergence. AI could be incredibly helpful in kids with learning differences. So I think that would be one of my first recommendations. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Murray, your testimony highlights some of the innovative projects that you undertook to improve teacher training and recruitment, retention, including establishing a registered apprenticeship in your schools for teachers and principals and creating non-traditional pathways to a teaching degree. Now, in your experience, why is apprenticeship a beneficial model for future educators, and what advice do you have for expanding these apprenticeships in other districts and states? I've helped start career-wise out in Colorado and have been following this closely.
Sure. So hats off to the Department of Labor for providing funding for that opportunity to really any school system or state across the country. That's a powerful scenario. So our apprentices are teacher residents. They spend a full year with a master teacher in our environment. So if you think about that traditional college experience of 4 years, your final year of college typically placed you in what we would call a student teaching environment. For me, that was 15 weeks. This is a full year from August through the end of May, placement for students. They work with a master teacher. And so when those students are finished with that year and enter the classroom as a real teacher, they are much better equipped. We no longer have that first-year teacher learning loss that we sometimes see. These individuals are already quite good and accomplished. And so the apprenticeship program provides that opportunity, and we see a remarkable difference in teacher performance.
I appreciate that. Dr. West, the NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the NAEP show that the reading scores, as we've already discussed, for 4th and 8th graders have consistently declined for the last decade. It also shows that the gap between highest performing and lowest performing students continues to grow, that as again decided by that graph. So how can, if you look at it strictly from the point of view of preparing educators, how can we prepare them to teach more effectively? What tools should they have that they're not using? I think some of what Sal Khan has done with AI comes to mind, and as a dyslexic, we're well represented with dyslexics around here. What are better ways we can prepare educators to teach reading effectively?
Well, so I think it starts with an issue that a lot of states have already paid attention to, which is encouraging, equipping teachers with a better understanding of what's often referred to as the science of reading, right? And so in Massachusetts, where I'm on the state board, we've been doing reviews of all of our educator preparation programs to make sure that what they're teaching is aligned to that body of evidence, really on phonics and its importance for decoding. I think the important next step that we need to take, and some states are already paying attention to it, including very much Louisiana, is realizing that reading is not just about decoding and phonics, but it's also about developing strong background knowledge across multiple subject areas. And so making sure that, as I said in my testimony, students are being exposed to knowledge-rich curricula across different subjects. That is what they need to be truly strong readers on assessments of reading comprehension like the NAEP and in their lives.
I could not agree more. Again, I'm out of time, but I appreciate all of you. Having you all here is a real benefit. I yield back.
Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for coming. Dr. West, I just want to start with you. I was struck by a line in your testimony. You said, that there was a lack of direct evidence of a causal link between smartphones and learning. I guess I just want to probe that a little more. Is that because that there's not enough research being done, or just it's too difficult to be able to actually be able to deduce the causality there? Can you go in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so I would say that when you have a single time series, like the data on U.S. student achievement over time, we have that from the NAEP, we have data on each state, but the emergence of social media and smartphones is really something that occurred everywhere all at once. So it's sort of hard to rule out anything else that occurred roughly in the first part of the 2010s. And, social media was not introduced carefully via a randomized controlled trial that we could study. Now, right now, we have the opportunity to learn about that question by studying what happens when you introduce cell phone bans at school, what happens when you take steps to address inappropriate use or unhelpful use outside of school. And so I think we'll actually learn a lot more about what's happened in the past by studying the effects of steps that we're taking now.
Yeah, thank you. It feels like there is growing momentum, though, for actions like, a cell phone ban. I mean, I'm just kind of curious here of the five of you, is that something that all of you would be supportive of? Dr. Henachek, is that something?
I'm generally inclined in that way, but I, at the same time, don't think that's going to reverse the trends we've seen in terms of student performance. I think it's something we should very seriously consider and evaluate, but I think that the problems are much larger than just cell phones.
Thank you. Dr. West?
I, as a member of the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, I've been arguing unsuccessfully for us to take that approach. But I'd go back to something I said to Senator Hawley, which is I don't think we should be thinking solely through the lens of bans on use at school. I think we need to take a broader approach.
Yeah. Dr. Jenner?
I could not agree more. I think by just talking about bans in schools, we are totally missing the mark. If you lock cell phones up all day, social media has still impacted kids the night before, and they're bringing that into schools every day.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be a bigger conversation.
Dr. Murray?
Echo the same comment. I think it'll be interesting to see the results of this, but if we're not paying attention to the whole picture and the whole child, then we're going to miss this opportunity with our children. So our eyes have to be wide open.
Yeah, Dr. Winthrop, before I turn to you, because I have a sense of where your position is, but I'll be honest with you, like I got a third grader and a fifth grader, and it's not just me when I talk to parents right now, like we're struggling to understand how to balance this because there's part of us that's like, the test scores are down. So there's part of us that's thinking like, okay, well, we got to, program every moment of their lives, their weekends and this and that with school, and sports and this and arts and testing and tutoring. It's a lot, but then we're also kind of hearing that like, look, they need more unstructured time. They need to be able to play. They need to be able to explore. I guess I'm just trying to get a sense from you, like we're talking about all this effort to try to help teachers understand their roles and get stronger and others in the education system. Where do the parents fit in? Like how do we try to get a sense of what role we need to be playing better on?
Thank you for that question, Senator. It is every parent's sort of nightmare trying to navigate technology. And I would say a couple of things. One, parents play an incredibly important role, and we have done a very poor job collectively in the education and child development space, supporting them and educating them. So one, we have to have common sense rules in our households as a parent. I'm a parent of 2 teens, and I take the phones away, no phones in the bedroom at night. Second, we need to educate our kids and really have conversations with them about what is social media and why we don't want them to spend hours on it. You need to get outside and play. You should connect with other people. My poor children are so sick of me telling them this, but it's been effective over the years. And third, we have to, as parents, not just monitor their time, but as we, tragically heard around with AI companions, we have to look at what they're doing online and the content. And I would say, tell them, hey, I bought the phone, I pay for the data, I'm gonna periodically check this. You should tell your friends that I'm gonna be checking your social media
Dr. Murray, just here at the end here, this hearing is K-12, but when I was looking through your plan, part of it was about pre-K and expanding pre-K. should we be thinking about a paradigm shift here of really trying to think not just of K through 12, but pre-K through 12? And I know I'm out of time, but just as a yes or no, is that a direction we need to be pushing?
Absolutely. From birth to 5, we see that students, when they come to school, many times are not ready. So anything that I think we can do to support moms and dads, families, caregivers, to help with the education, early learning is going to benefit.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great panel. Great panel. I've been back and forth between here and an Armed Services Committee meeting, but both the questions and your testimony has been very helpful. For Dr. Winthrop, one issue that hasn't come up is the way we fund schools. And we, compared to international norms, are one of the most inequitable funders in that we rely heavily on property tax. And some states try to equalize it, some states do a less good job, and so we have jurisdictions that are well-funded and those that aren't. Virginia, we have some experience with this. Our schools are ranked as some of the best in the country now, and we're not focused on that so much because we still got more to do, but we are focused on where we came from. When I was born, you couldn't learn in a school with a kid whose skin color was different. And we had jurisdictions that, when ordered to integrate, said we'd rather close our public schools down for all kids than allow people to learn together. Thank God we've left that behind, and we have embraced an equalization strategy where state dollars go more heavily to low-income jurisdictions than that. How important for both state policymakers and federal policymakers is it to focus on equalization of resources, especially to challenged districts?
Thank you, Senator. I'm not an expert in school funding mechanisms. I would yield that to some of my colleagues on the panel, but I can say from a global perspective, part of the reason, and again, my colleague, Dr. Hanashek, has done some pioneering work here. Part of the reason that the US is so sort of low on global rankings is our inequality. We have some of the best schools in the world, and we have some pretty poor ones. And so a lot of OECD countries, many OECD countries, when they think about investing in their schools, they put more resources in the underserved communities. You will find, unlike here, you will find more qualified teachers in under-resourced communities and more teachers generally. But again,
on the subject of teachers, Dr. Murray, Senator Baldwin asked you about the cancellation of a grant that you all were using. Virginia had 2 programs that were teacher prep, innovative programs that were receiving federal grant monies, one in my home city of Richmond, a teacher residency program, that were among the many grants that were canceled by the Trump administration early into this administration. 34 states had programs that were scrapped at a time when we have teacher shortages and we need to be innovative. And the program in Virginia, the Richmond program, was scrapped because it focused on diversity. And what was the diversity? It served jurisdictions that were poor. Richmond, and some Appalachian and rural jurisdictions. And because of that focus on diversity, that was the asserted reason for the cancellation. May have just been to save some bucks, but it was counterproductive. Let me ask you, Dr. Murray, this question. When you were superintendent, was Medicaid funding important to your school district?
Yes, Medicaid funding was important and continues to be.
Because it helps provide wraparound services for students who have special needs.
76% of the students that we served in the system I was in live in poverty. And so many of those students have specific needs. As we think about school budgeting, it costs more to educate certain types of students because of the conditions in which they bring to school. We have to meet.
And everyone here knows this, but some watching might not.
Sure.
Funding for students with disabilities is really important, but the IDEA does not fund the wheelchair that gets the kid to school so that the kid can access educational opportunities. That's often from Medicaid. I'm deeply worried about the effect of Medicaid cuts in the reconciliation bill for a variety of reasons, but including on student performance. The last 2 things I'll say is one issue that's not been mentioned that we just have to acknowledge is guns. Teacher told me not long ago, in Virginia, we have a moment of silence to begin the school day. I imagine many states do. And a teacher said to me, I can tell you what every adult in the building is thinking every day during the moment of silence. And it was, let today not be the day. That was sobering. The other thing, I'm going to finish on an exciting note, engagement. We don't want passengers, we want explorers. And I associate myself with what Senator Euston said about career and technical education, and I'd just like to tell a quick story. I really pushed career and tech ed when I was governor. My dad ran a welding and ironworking shop, and I ran a vocational school in Honduras working with Jesuit missionaries. I really pushed it. And once I was in Arlington, and a mother forced her son to come up to me, tell Governor Kane what's going on. Well, the story was this. A talented youngster in high school who was a lackluster student. Parents were tearing their hair out. They realized the only thing that excited this kid was watching the TV show Scrubs. They enrolled him in an EMT course at the local career and technical center. He loved it. And 6 months later, his biology grade had gone from a D to an A. It wasn't just that he loved the CTE course. It was all of a sudden, well, I'm not just memorizing facts. I see the connection. And so Senator Euston talked about, and I think Dr. Jenner, you talked about this, and Dr. Muir, you talked about this. CTE is great. We want kids to have career and technical skills. It also makes them better at the academic subjects because they suddenly see it's not rote memorization or just, I got to know this for a test. You can engage them in things that really excite them. And I am really heartened by what I see as a real renaissance in CTE, no longer a kind of voc tech, I'm in the voc tech program. I think people are really doing some amazing creative things all around the country in advancing CTE. A lot of folks on this committee have focused on it. Very bipartisan, see it in red states and blue states. And I think that's a way to engage and excite young people that can then have, broader consequences even beyond the particular CTE discipline that they're trying to master. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Now, Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Massachusetts is not just the Bay State, we're the brain state. Across the board, we have the highest scores in math and verbal, 4th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade in the country. We're very proud of that, and we can also see all the holes that still exist in the Massachusetts system that we have to fix. But we're very proud of it. But our model is very simple. We invest in opportunity and empower the educators, local leaders, and families who are on the front lines of helping students to succeed. We still have more work to do to ensure that every single student, regardless of income, geography, or ability, thrives. But instead of striving for progress, in the last 8 months, the Trump administration has made cuts and caused chaos. Trump clawed back $106 million from Massachusetts in funds that were already distributed to the Massachusetts schools to help students recover from pandemic learning losses. Trump has slashed $900 million in education research money. A rural school district in Massachusetts was using that funding to implement world-class literacy interventions. Trump has cut $600 million in teacher training programs. In Boston and Springfield, that funding was going towards training and recruitment for teachers and paraprofessionals. Trump cut $1 billion in funding for mental health care in schools, including a program in Massachusetts training 50 school psychologists to work in high-need districts. So for months, Trump administration illegally withheld $7 billion in funding, including $108 million for Massachusetts that supports English learners, after-school programs, and more, throwing school and town budgets across Massachusetts and the country into chaos. And congressional Republicans passed their big ugly bill, which slashed $1 trillion from Medicaid and SNAP. Schools receive $7.5 billion from Medicaid each year, and 80% of superintendents expect these Medicaid cuts to result in staff layoffs. And up to 16 million children could lose access to free school meals. So the Republican and Trump education agenda is clear. They want to gut our public schools, rip away funding, and leave local communities picking up the pieces and figuring out literally how they're supposed to keep the lights on. It's shameful. It's a disgrace. We have a plan in America, and Trump and his Department of Education are destroying that plan. And it shows up at the local level that you are here testifying. But without looking at the comprehensive impact which Trump and his administration are having, we can't see it. So Dr. Murray, can you speak to the decisions that districts are forced to make when they lose huge amounts of money that they had expected from the federal government?
Thank you for that question. I think anytime schools are disrupted by funding losses, it forces us to look internally about how we will make adjustments. Our primary responsibility is to educate the students that come before us each and every day. And our teachers and principals are doing that even today. In the midst of crisis, in the midst of any situation that may happen, we continue to do that. And so certainly any change as we are moving down this education pathway can create a negative disruption, and so we're forced to deal with those things. So it can be difficult at times.
Can I go across the board with them? Just yes or no? Are all these cuts causing significant disruptions in school systems in America? Dr. Winthrop, yes or no?
So when I'm out visiting
That's okay.
district
Just
leaders.
yes or no?
yeah,
Is the funding drain causing significant harm?
What I'm hearing, and I don't have a lot of research on this,
Again,
but what I'm
yes,
hearing,
yes, okay.
what I'm hearing is it is
Dr.
difficult, yes.
Dr. Jenner, yes or no?
It's always helpful to have a timeline and predictability.
Let me just,
I know.
Okay, I'll finish, okay? A vision without funding is an hallucination, okay? This isn't the miracle of loaves and fishes at the local level. You need actual funding streams that are coming in, and it's being cut off. I just want to speak to an issue striking fear in the hearts of parents, students, and educators, and that is the draconian and authoritarian immigration enforcement regime Donald Trump has unleashed, and the Supreme Court has rubber stamped. Parents cannot drop their children off at school if they are worried about encountering masked ICE agents in the parking lot or on the street, as parents in Massachusetts have experienced. Students can't learn if they are afraid, and it affects the whole school when the classmates know that there are other children in the class who are afraid to even be there. And that's a factor in schools all across the country, especially those that have minority students in significant proportions. It's having an impact. And we just have to talk about it, and it comes from the top, from the Trump administration, parking ICE agents outside of junior high schools and grammar schools to try to grab a parent. That's all the school's talking about. You can talk about social media. That's real life. That's their friend. That's those families. And it affects the education in our country. Thank you all so much for what you do every day.
One of the privileges of hanging till the end, I get to ask another set of questions. But first, I want to, Dr. Murray mentioned earlier the Deming quote that the system you have is perfectly designed for the results you get. We're not talking about the results of anything that the Trump policy has currently done. We're talking about the end result of what has been done for the last however many years. And so the mess we're in right now has nothing to do with that which is said. And one thing you can say about President Trump, the guy's willing to break eggs. Clearly, what you said, Dr. Hanishek, and what you said, Dr. Murray, if we keep doing the same thing we're doing, we're going to continue to get these lousy results. And I'll point out there's $190 billion in COVID funding to supposedly make up the mess, and there's been no improvement. In fact, there's been even some deterioration, except for 2 states, so I think that we have to put this in perspective. And I would argue some of the reforms, such as moving some of the the technical institutions over the Department of Labor, is kind of it's the Department of Labor. Maybe they can go in there and help those student programs, but that's for us to find out. I have a couple more questions. Dr. Winthrop, theoretically, ChatGPT and other AI is going to respond to the child. And if the child is having a reading problem, then the child's reading problem will be picked up. When I do Spanish, I occasionally ChatGPT, how do I do this? And it'll tell me how to, form my soft palate, and I'll try and pronounce that word. And if I get it wrong, it keeps on prompting me until I get it right. Now, I say that because whenever you say, that is programmed for an N of 1, for Bill Cassidy's lousy Spanish pronunciation. So tell me, you're saying that the pedagogical system has to be put in, if you will, I won't say imposed, but certainly given us somewhat of a framework for the AI program to learn from in order to teach others how to learn. But I thought that was the genius of AI, that it could adapt to the individual's individual learning style. Any thoughts on that?
I think that that is one of the really good possibilities of using AI in education. Again, if it's used on good content, because there's lots of, ridiculous ways to teach you Spanish. So if you have good content that is vetted by educators, this idea of personalization, of really using AI to really help give kids feedback and figure out where their gaps are with, mediated by an adult, is a really good area that we should lean into in education versus using AI.
Dr. Murray and Jenner, I have an 11-year-old grandson, and squirrel, 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 his brain's all over the place. And my wife, and I was that same kid. My wife, who, again, full disclosure, is public charter schools for children with dyslexia, she said most curriculums are made for young girls who are very focused. They're able to drill down, they're able to memorize, they're able to kind of regurgitate. With a little boy, again, this is my wife speaking, the little boy, but you see this pattern, more likely to have ADD, more likely to have and for that child to become an explorer under our current paradigm is almost like ex nay, no way. So you've both been educators in the practicum, if you will. How do you speak to that? Is my little boy a one-off, or is that, no, that's kind of a problem, and how do we address it then?
Your grandson is the one that a great teacher deals with every day very effectively. I think every child that walks in our door is unique, and our opportunity as an educator is to create an environment that engages every single student in a way that is appropriate for them. And great teachers have been doing that for generations and will continue to do that. I think AI gives our teachers.
But go back to me. He'll play with Legos. He'll be focused on Legos. So my point being that there is a sort of tactile sort of way to engage that works for him. But if you give him a book, it's just like that.
Then there's the bridge. Again, a great teacher can take those Legos and turn that into a literacy opportunity for your child. That's the gift of a master teacher, is able to
Now, that does seem one-on-one as opposed to what our typical classroom is, in which there's 16 to 30. Mm-hmm. It seems to be more challenging for her to teach that child. So, Dr. Jenner? And I'm not challenging, I'm just exploring. Dr. Jenner?
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly believe, and there are many children like that in every classroom. We have to do a better job at lighting the fire of purpose in kids and understanding their unique talents, the value they can have, the possibilities, show them. I believe wholeheartedly that's why work-based learning, we need to do more of that. We need to offer the opportunity to connect students with what they enjoy. I think that is an area we have to lean in more as educators.
Dr. West, changing the subject, and Dr. Hanishek, I just used ChatGPT to look at the influence of the No Child Left Behind accountability measures on NAEP scores, and it found very little correlation. It said you saw it on the standardized testing, but not on NAEP. Now, that may be hallucinations by ChatGPT, but they said that the trends that drove the improving scores could have just been the momentum from the earlier years, but then after the mid-2000s, it began to plateau. Any comment on that?
I would say you just showed that ChatGPT has not yet mastered research design for causal inference, right? Of about half of the states were sort of adopting those measures, and they were driving the improvement in the pre-NCLB years, and then you had the other half of states come on board. You would expect the sort of slope of improvement to be pretty consistent before and after the law. So you have to really think about what was happening. This was a period when some states were taking the lead. Then you had the federal government saying everyone needs to get on board, and you have to think about how that would translate into overall improvement.
Dr. Hanishek?
I would agree with that the best research on NCLB, which is hard to research because it was a national program, the best research suggests that it had a positive impact. No Child Left Behind had all kinds of flaws, but even with its flaws, it had a positive impact. And that's why I think that one of the roles of the federal government is to talk about standards and where we should be going, what our nation should be doing, and sort of providing data that can support better accountability for outcomes.
Now, let me ask you one more thing. You're almost nihilistic. I'm misrepresenting, a little exaggerating, in terms of all of our incremental interventions making a difference. And then you quoted 3 districts, DC, Dallas, and Odessa, in which they actually empowered teachers with pay that was selectively given to those who by some metric were doing better. And what we heard from Odessa is they didn't just give them $1,000 a month, they took them up a lot. They took them up a whole lot. Now, they had a really good tax base thanks to fossil fuel, but that's another story for my minority person over here. But that said, it does seem like the good teacher is still driving, and that the empowering of the teacher, both by salary, by reward for performance, and then by mentoring, is still, would you be less nihilistic if we said that was a solution that we should be promoting?
Absolutely. I want to distinguish between this long list of incremental, this is the thing to do it programs that we put in place, and ones that are based upon student performance. The key element there, and it works through teachers, it works through principals also in these schools, is that the rewards are heavily weighted toward student outcomes and performance, whereas the history of things since A Nation at Risk have been largely add-on programs that have not been related at all to student outcomes. So if you maintain that distinction, I would put the former category, basically incremental things into a different category.
Got it. And I think, Dr. West, just as a favor, you mentioned that it is possible to evaluate an N of 1. And that may be out there. We were talking earlier, do you evaluate in the aggregate, or do you evaluate the aggregate of N's of 1s? Do you follow? Do you remember that?
What I was saying is the way in which we look at growth over time for an educator or for a school or a school system is that we look at N's of 1. We compare where a given child was last year to where they are this year, but then we aggregate them up.
I get that.
Yeah.
Now, but I'm not familiar, which is, by the way, I'm not like you. I'm not an educator, if you will, or educator researcher. But I would be interested in that system, because it's not my understanding that right now it's broadly used that you aggregate an N of 1. It's rather the aggregate.
I'm not sure I see the distinction.
Because if you have a child who starts off low,
Yeah.
and that child improves but is still below average, and let's say you have 20% of the population dyslexic.
Yeah.
So their reading score is going to start off almost by definition below average. And then you move those up significantly, but nonetheless, they're still all below average. If you put them in the aggregate, you're going to say, oh my gosh, they're below average. But if you say, no, wait, this student improved 30%, and this student 10%, and this student 50%, then you're aggregating 10 and 15 and 15%, as opposed to there's still a D. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so in measures that are pure growth measures, they generally are doing what you're saying, N of 1 and aggregating up. In many state accountability systems, those measures are then combined with level-based or proficiency-based measures to generate an overall rating. And so that makes it hard for schools that serve particularly disadvantaged students to really excel.
Makes it impossible.
Yeah, and so we need to be measuring both levels and growth.
So then,
Levels tell us where improvement is needed. Growth tells us what educators are contributing. We don't want to then average them together at the end.
but isn't that what we're doing now? We're averaging them together?
Many state accountability systems do, in fact, average them together.
If you had to write the system that didn't average them together but would still be accountable, will you send it to me?
We're working on that in Massachusetts, and I will. Yes, sir.
Oh, you tell me it's a work in progress, so that's not helpful. Dr. Hanishek.
If I could just add, what you're pointing out is one of the flaws in No Child Left Behind, is that it paid attention to the level of performance and didn't pay attention to this growth. And as NCLB evolved, a number of states started moving more toward growth. Florida is one of the states that did this. Texas is another that, in fact, tried to weight, just as you say, the percentages of growth more heavily.
Then I'll study those models. Several of my colleagues, as they walked out, said, "What a good panel, and what a good hearing." And obviously, for the people who don't know this, Republicans picked 3 of you and Democrats picked 2, and I'm not sure that you could have told which were which and which were which based upon the interest from Democrats and Republicans speaking to you. It's a compliment to you. So, for any senator wishing to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due at 5 p.m. Thursday, October the 2nd. Again, thank you for being here. The committee stands adjourned.